All right, strap in, everyone, for a deep dive into history. We've got some really fascinating stuff to unpack today about the Mongol invasions of Japan.
Yeah, a real clash of empires back in the late 13th century, a moment that could have totally reshaped the world as we know it.
Definitely a turning point. So just to set the scene for our listeners, we're talking about Kublai Khan, grandson of the legendary Genghis Khan.
Right. And by this point, he's ruling the vast Yuan dynasty, already conquered Korea.
Ambitious, to say the least.
And Japan was right in his sights.
Okay, so we've got this powerful emperor setting his sights on Japan, but what was Japan like at the time?
Well, they were ruled by the Kamakura shogunate, a feudal military government led by the Hojo clan.
Ah, the Hojo clan,
Yeah.
famous for their warrior culture. I bet they weren't just going to roll over.
Not a chance. They were fiercely independent, and they were not about to bow down to Kublai Khan. In fact, before resorting to force, Kublai Khan actually tried the diplomatic route.
Really?
Yeah, he sent six separate missions to Japan between 1266 and 1273, demanding their submission.
Wow, 6 missions. Talk about persistence. He really wanted Japan under his control.
He did, but the Japanese rejected every single attempt, basically telling Kublai Khan, bring it on.
So that set the stage for the first invasion in 1274. What can you tell us about that?
Okay, so for this first attempt, Kublai Khan assembled a massive force, something like 28,000 to 30,000 soldiers, 900 ships. A huge undertaking.
Wow, 900 ships. That just paints a picture of the sheer scale of this invasion.
And it shows how determined he was to conquer Japan.
Absolutely. And were the Mongols bringing anything new to the battlefield? What was their military advantage?
Well, the Mongols were known for their incredible military innovations, right? They were masters of strategy, logistics.
Right. I've heard about their use of horseback archery and their ability to cover vast distances.
Oh, yeah, all that. But in this invasion, they also employed something the Japanese had never encountered before, gunpowder weapons specifically, bombs.
Bombs. Wow, that must have been terrifying to face for the first time.
Oh, definitely a shock. They called them thunder crash bombs, and they were packed with gunpowder and scrap iron. Imagine the chaos and destruction they caused.
So not just a massive army, but cutting-edge technology too. Kublai Khan was pulling out all the stops.
Yeah, and you can see why they saw early successes. But before we dive into those battles, I came across this story about the shogun, Hojo Tokimune.
Oh yeah, what about him?
Well, apparently before the invasion, he was struggling with fear, natural, right? Facing this overwhelming force. So he goes to his Zen master for guidance.
Interesting. The samurai were deeply spiritual, weren't they?
Very much so. So the Zen master tells him to meditate, find the source of his fear. Tokimune roars katsu during this meditation, a display of his determination.
Katsu. I've heard that means victory, right?
Right. And the Zen master declares, it is true that the son of a lion roars as a lion. Powerful imagery.
Absolutely. It gives you a glimpse into the cultural context, the mindset of the samurai facing this huge threat.
Definitely. So, getting back to the invasion, the Mongols first attacked Tsushima and Iki, islands off the coast of Japan.
I'm guessing those were strategically important, stepping stones to the mainland.
Exactly. Taking those islands gave them a foothold, a base, to launch their main assault on Kyushu, the southernmost of Japan's main islands.
So how did the Japanese samurai fare against this Mongol war machine?
Well, they fought bravely, ferociously, but they were initially outmatched,
In what way?
Their traditional style of single combat, it just wasn't effective against the disciplined formations of the Mongols.
Right, and then you've got those bombs. The psychological impact alone must have been huge.
Absolutely. It was a whole new kind of warfare for the samurai.
So it sounds like the Mongols are on their way to victory.
It seemed that way. They were making serious headway. But then, in a dramatic twist, nature stepped in.
Oh.
A massive storm, most likely a typhoon, hit the Mongol fleet while they were anchored at Hakata Bay.
Hold on. So just as it looked like the Mongols were about to achieve their goal, a storm sweeps in and changes everything.
Just like that, the storm inflicted heavy losses on the fleet, scattered their ships. They were forced to retreat.
What a turn of events. Even the most powerful armies can be at the mercy of the elements, huh?
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it? Nature's power. So this first invasion ended in failure for Kublai Khan. But even in defeat, it must have had a huge impact on both sides.
It definitely set the stage for what was to come.
Yeah, and the second invasion would be even more dramatic. That first invasion was a real wake-up call for both sides.
Definitely a turning point. So how did the Japanese respond? Were they just waiting around for round two?
Oh no, they were proactive. They knew Kublai Khan wouldn't give up that easily, so they started preparing for the inevitable second invasion.
What kind of preparations? Give us the details.
Well, they mobilized their samurai forces, of course, but they also went a step further, strengthening existing fortifications and building new ones. They weren't taking any chances.
Like what kind of fortifications? Anything particularly impressive?
Think forts, stone walls. They even drove stakes into the seabed at Hakata Bay to obstruct any potential landings.
Wow, driving stakes into the seabed. That's hardcore. They were really committed to defending their homeland.
Absolutely. They knew what was at stake. And meanwhile, Kublai Khan was licking his wounds, plotting his revenge.
So he was determined to try again.
Oh yeah, conquering Japan had become a matter of pride for him. And remember, this is right after his forces finally conquered the Song dynasty in China in 1279.
So he now had even more resources at his disposal.
Exactly. More manpower, shipbuilding capabilities, the whole shebang. The second invasion was going to be even bigger than the first.
How much bigger are we talking?
Well, in 1281, Kublai Khan launched a two-pronged attack. One fleet set sail from Korea, the other from southern China. Historians still debate the exact size, but some estimates put it at over 140,000 soldiers and sailors.
That is massive. I can't even imagine the logistics of coordinating such a huge force.
It was a monumental undertaking. And facing those kinds of numbers, the Japanese defenders must have felt the pressure.
Oh, I bet. But they'd had time to prepare, right? Did their fortifications hold up?
They did, surprisingly well, actually. Especially that wall at Hakata Bay proved to be very effective. The Mongols struggled to land, facing constant volleys of arrows and fierce resistance from the samurai.
And there were some pretty incredible stories of samurai valor during that second invasion, like the tale about Kusanojiro.
Oh yes, Kusanojiro, legendary samurai. The story goes that he snuck onto a Mongol ship at night, set it ablaze, and took 21 heads.
Wow, talk about a one-man army. That takes guts.
It really does. But it also highlights a difference in this second invasion. The Mongols were a bit less coordinated this time around. For example, the Korean fleet actually attacked ahead of schedule, disobeying orders.
So even with their superior numbers, they had their own internal struggles.
They did. And managing a force that size across vast distances, it must have been a logistical nightmare. Their communication wasn't as tight as it could be.
Interesting. So even with all their might, the Mongols weren't having an easy time of it.
Not at all. But just when things seemed to be at a stalemate, nature decided to intervene once again.
Uh-oh, not another typhoon.
Yep, you guessed it. Another massive typhoon, even stronger than the first one, struck the Mongol fleet off the coast of Kyushu.
The legendary kamikaze, the divine wind.
That's the one. And this time, its impact was devastating. It absolutely shattered the Mongol fleet. Ships were wrecked, thousands drowned. It was a catastrophic blow, one they couldn't recover from.
So twice Kublai Khan tried to conquer Japan, and twice he was thwarted by these incredible storms.
It really makes you think about the role of fate, doesn't it? Even the most ambitious plans can be overturned by the sheer power of nature.
Absolutely. And for the Japanese, these storms weren't just random events. They were seen as divine intervention, a sign that their land was protected by the gods.
Exactly. It reinforced their belief in their destiny, their special place in the world, and that belief would have a lasting impact on Japanese culture and identity.
So in the end, it was nature, not samurai swords, that defeated Kublai Khan.
It seems that way, doesn't it? But of course the story doesn't end there. These invasions had a ripple effect that went far beyond the immediate battles.
Right, we've got to talk about the aftermath, the legacies of these epic clashes. What happened next? Okay, so those typhoons really changed the course of history. What happened after Kublai Khan's dreams of conquering Japan were, well, sunk?
Well, for Kublai Khan, it was a major blow, both to his pride and to the Mongol Empire's expansion. I mean, they were on this incredible roll, conquering vast territories. But Japan put a stop to that.
So it marked a turning point for the Mongol Empire.
Yeah, definitely. It showed that their power wasn't unlimited, that there were limits to their reach, and it also weakened their naval capabilities, which had repercussions for their influence in other parts of Asia.
It's interesting to think how these events in Japan had ripple effects across the entire region. And what about Korea? They were caught in the middle of all this, weren't they?
Yeah, they were forced to support the Mongol war effort, providing troops, resources, and especially ships. Both invasions really took a toll on Korea.
I can imagine. So even in victory, there can be unintended consequences for those caught in the crossfire. It's a reminder to look beyond the main players to see the impact on everyone involved.
Absolutely. So much of history is about those interconnected stories.
Yeah.
But shifting back to Japan, those victories, aided by the kamikazes, really had a profound impact on their development.
You mentioned earlier how that word kamikaze became so ingrained in their national identity. Did it change their approach to warfare?
It did. It reinforced the idea that Japan was divinely protected, destined for greatness, and that belief would shape their military thinking for centuries to come. It's amazing how those events, happening so long ago, could have such a long-lasting effect.
It's a reminder of how history shapes our beliefs, our actions, even today. And speaking of long-lasting effects, we can't forget the technological influence of those invasions.
Oh, right. We talked about those thunder crash bombs, how they introduced the Japanese to the destructive potential of gunpowder. Well, it certainly got their attention.
So did they start developing their own gunpowder weapons?
They did. The Mongol invasions really accelerated the adoption of gunpowder in Japan. It wouldn't be long before they were using it in their own internal conflicts.
So in a way, even in defeat, Kublai Khan left his mark on Japanese warfare. It's a bit ironic, isn't it?
It is. And the exchange wasn't limited to just gunpowder. The invasions also spurred advances in Japanese swordsmithing.
Oh, how so?
Well, the Japanese swordsmiths, they studied the broken and bent blades of samurai who had fought against the Mongols.
Trying to figure out how to make them stronger.
Exactly. And through that process, they learned new techniques, new ways of forging stronger, more flexible blades. It's kind of amazing to think that the iconic katana, that symbol of the samurai, was partly shaped by those encounters with the Mongols.
So even those fierce battles, those clashes of empires, led to some unexpected innovations in cultural exchange.
It's all part of the complex tapestry of history.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. The ambition of Kublai Khan, the drama of the invasions, those incredible typhoons, the lasting impact on both the Mongols and the Japanese. What's the big takeaway here?
I think it's the reminder that history is rarely simple, rarely straightforward. There are so many factors at play. Human actions, cultural beliefs, the unpredictable forces of nature, even just plain luck.
And sometimes those unexpected twists and turns can have the most profound consequences.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, what if things had gone differently? What if those typhoons hadn't intervened? What if the Mongols had landed elsewhere or chosen a different time of year?
So many what ifs. It's a good reminder that we should never take history for granted. There's always more to discover, more to learn.
Absolutely. History is full of surprises.
Well, thanks for diving into this fascinating chapter of history with us today. It's been an incredible journey.